I'm not done yet! Did I just call you out? Today's art talk is all about the importance of learning to share our process as artists and learning how to deal with feedback. And while we talk about this, in the background you're going to be able to watch my drawing process from start to finish for this month's creativity challenge. And this month the challenge is so silly, it is by far my favorite, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to talk about the challenge in details later in the video, so make sure you stay tuned for that. In the meantime though, get comfortable, grab a cup of tea, sit back, and let's have a chat. One thing I haven't shown much in the first two drawing time lapses of this art talk series is the sketching phase. And to be fair, that's because, well, I didn't sketch a whole lot in the other two illustrations. But in this case, I really struggled getting my character together. So I thought it would be a perfect time to talk about sketching, yes, but also the whole idea of sharing our process and getting feedback along the way. So in the first video of this art talk series, we discussed the curse of perfectionism, and we talked about tips on how to overcome the fear paralysis that comes with it. And a lot of you mentioned in the comments that the video helped you feel a little bit more comfortable sharing your art, even if it wasn't perfect. Now, obviously my first reaction was to think, oh, that is amazing. But then I started to wonder, why do we as visual artists tend to hide our process as we are drawing? It's like we wait for our drawing to be absolutely perfect before showing it to anyone. And if we're honest with each other, sometimes we just never get to that perfect piece. We either give up along the way because we're too frustrated, or we do finish the illustration but we just don't like it enough, so we hide it as deep in our files as we can. Now, funnily enough, I do think one of the main reasons we don't reach that perfect piece, or even just a piece we're happy with, is precisely because we are not showing it to people and getting feedback along the way. For example, this morning I was replying to someone in my illustration course who was telling me, "You're so good at spotting things to fix in our illustrations." And just to give you a little bit of context, I had given her a few pointers on one of her exercises she felt was not good enough, when I think, in fact, it was really quite good. But the truth is, I'm not exceptionally good at finding issues in other people's drawings, although I do have quite a lot of experience doing it by now after coaching hundreds and hundreds of students. But it's just easier for me because I'm seeing that illustration or that sketch or that exercise, whatever it is, for the first time, or at least for the first time in a while. But the students have usually been working on their piece for, sometimes hours by that point. Like in everything, issues are way easier to see if you have a step back. But that can take time, and we don't always have the time to just put our work away for weeks. So that is the first beautiful thing about feedback. It can help us get a fresh look at what we're working on without having to put our work away for a long time. It's kind of like being able to hit a reset button in our brain and our eyes. But that's just one of the benefits, and probably the most obvious one as well. The next great thing about feedback, though, might be a little bit more subtle, but it is absolutely crucial to creating illustrations that other people resonate with. So let's circle back to my little bunny here. One technique I often use when creating characters is duplicating my sketch as I make small tweaks and keeping multiple versions on the screen as I test different stuff. I don't delete anything, and I try to draw whatever comes to mind without judgment. Now, if you watch the first two art talks, you might be connecting the dots here. This is exactly in line with some of the advice I was given in those videos, and this idea that what we do does not need to be perfect every single step of the way. Now, having many tiny sketches like this allows me to explore freely and quickly, then pick and choose what I like from each version and blend it all in one master sketch. But this time I created a few versions of my character and I could not decide between two, ears up or ears down. Now, to be completely transparent, I absolutely loved ears down, but for some reason I could not let ears up go either. So I asked for help on Instagram. I created a reel and just showed the two versions and asked for people to leave me comments. And the response was really interesting. A lot of you also loved Bunny with ears down, but some people said something along the lines of, "You know what? This is a barista holding a coffee cup ready to serve a customer. And although the ears down are super cute, we feel like the ears up bring a lot of energy and carry the idea better." Oh my goodness, that is such an important piece of information. I think it is so important to remember why we create illustrations in the first place. Yes, we're trying to do something that is pretty and that we like, but at the end of the day, those images we create communicate something, no matter how silly or small that something might be. And we are not communicating that to ourselves. We are communicating with other people. And so to know what they understand, essentially from our illustrations, is the most valuable piece of information we can get. Now, I'll give it to you, it can be really, really hard feedback to receive, but I do believe it can also make or break your illustrations. A good example of that would be when I asked for help picking between 3 characters, a milk carton, a coffee cup, and a soda can. As usual, I had my favorite, which in this case was the soda can, and I thought it just looked so chill and nonplussed. But some people pointed out that it actually looked a little bit too chill, if you know what I mean. And the thing is, they were 100% right. And I'm so glad they pointed it out because I was just blinded by the fact I liked my sketch. But let's come back to our buddy here. One person suggested trying one ear up and one ear folded, which still add the cuteness factor of the ears down, but also has the energy of the ears up. And you know what? I could definitely get behind that. So I went back to the drawing board, quite literally, and ended up with 3 more versions. Now, to be honest, I was still in love with ears down. I tried to give it more energy by adding a flick at the bottom of the ears and some sort of a floating, jumping beanie hat thing. But when I posted the updated version on Instagram, something really interesting happened. Suddenly, people who were initially in love with the ears down as well now preferred the ears up with one folded ear. Isn't that so interesting? That was a total shift from one preference to another, a complete 180, or maybe 178 degrees because of the fold, but why do I think that happened? I think it's because what I was trying to convey to my illustration finally clicked. Everything made sense. Before, it was cute, but it did not make sense. Now, before we get all heated in the comments, does that mean everything we draw needs to have meaning or make sense? Of course not. And does that mean you need to make a poll for everything you ever sketch? Can you even imagine having to do that? Of course that's not a thing. But sometimes it's important, or interesting at least, to get some insight into what you're doing, even if it's just to see how people react and how you feel about their reaction. And that brings us to the core struggle we as artists face when sharing our process, our feelings. So let's dive in and talk about how we might learn to handle feedback. Okay, I'm gonna stop myself before I keep rambling some more about this. Let's talk a little bit about the creativity challenge. So this is challenge number 3 for the month of September 2024. And the theme this month is Woodland Cafe, specifically Strawbucks. So this month, you are going to create an illustration for a special fall drink. And to get your drink name, make sure to check the video description below. Now, you could keep it like that and just create the illustration based on the drink itself. But if you're up for an added challenge, you can also pick your special woodland barista and include it in the final illustration. Now, the challenge is all about creativity. So the final illustration is totally up to you. It could be a drink, it could be the drink and the barista, it could be a whole coffee shop, it could be a poster, whatever comes to mind as long as you use the prompts is all good. So that's kind of it. If you want more detail, make sure to check the video description. Otherwise, let's go back to the main discussion all about feedback. So by now it's pretty clear. Feedback is something that personally helps me see something I wouldn't have thought of by myself. And I really do believe that ultimately it helps me improve my illustrations. And so that's why asking for feedback, even when it's uncomfortable, is so important. But at the same time, you don't want to rely on feedback for every single decision. The line is very fine between seeking valuable input and doubting yourself. And the tricky thing is, feedback can also be a trigger for you to enter that self-doubt downward spiral. So how do you handle that? How do you sort through valuable feedback and questionable comments while your feelings are also in the mix? So once more, let's circle back to my little barista bunny here. So although I had a base idea and a sketch I was really happy with, as well as a simple color palette I was confident in, which in this case was the Starbucks green as my anchor color, and just natural, muted, organic colors like brown and gray for the rest. Although I had that, I still find myself being really frustrated at the coloring stage. And you can probably see that because I'm pretty much just frantically switching from one layer to the next, trying to figure out what feels off and fix it if possible. Now, honestly, I did that for way too long, until I finally admitted to myself that I was resisting drawing outlines, which is what I knew in my soul was missing, just because of a comment someone made weeks ago. So what was that comment? So someone sent me a super nice email saying that before watching one of my tutorials, they felt like drawing outlines or that using outlines in their illustrations made them less than, so not good enough for some reason. But after watching my video, they felt validated enough to draw outlines. So that's a super nice comment, right? But something about the fact they felt like outlines were subpar planted a seed in some weird part of my brain that outlines were not good enough. And again, this is absolutely wild because they sent me a message to tell me that they watched one of my videos, and then from watching that video, felt like outlines were not a bad thing at all. So it's the exact opposite of my feeling. But yet here I am filming a video about being bold and asking for feedback and sharing stuff that you're not happy with. And in the back of my mind, I'm concerned about outlines from that one little comment, which was a super nice comment. And there you go. Here lies the main challenge we face with feedback. We cannot take it personally. It is beyond important to learn to separate ourselves from our work enough to share it without letting the feedback define us as artists or even as people. And that's one of those things that is definitely easier said than done. But at the end of the day, that is a skill that you can transfer to every other aspect of your life. I know it's going to sound super dramatic, but it is truly life-changing. It's not going to happen overnight, of course. That is something you have to be consciously aware of and work on every single day. Now, for me, reading the highly recognized book, The 4 Agreements, was really, really helpful. So I will make sure to link it in the video description for those of you who may want to check it out. But to get back to our little bunny here once more, I ended up acknowledging my feelings of feeling not good enough because of a comment that was kind, and then pushed them aside for long enough so that I could draw my outlines. And when I did that, suddenly everything felt so much better. Just like when the sketch fell in place from the feedback about the ears. And just a little side note here, when I said I pushed my feelings aside, I didn't pretend they didn't exist. I just, again, acknowledged them and thanked them for trying to warn me about something, but then carried on because what they were trying to tell me about was just not rational or did not apply in this case at least. So I guess what I'm saying here is, at the end of the day, feedback is extremely valuable because it gives you a fresh look at your piece and it tells you more about how it is perceived by the people who will view it in the end. But feedback is also something we need to filter. And here I am not saying we should just disregard comments that ruffle our feathers only because they make us uncomfortable. Actually, this is when we should dive in even deeper to try and figure out the source of that uneasiness. But what I mean here is we have to learn to balance confidence in our work with openness to others' perspectives. So I'm curious, how do you deal with feedback? Because I shared my experience, but I know everyone has a completely different one. So if you have a couple minutes, please just leave me a comment below. I would absolutely love to read, and I really do my best to read all the comments on this new Art Talk series. I don't always answer to everything, but I really do try to read everything. Now, another thing I would also really, really love to see is your take on this month's creativity challenge. And once more, the details are going to be in the video description. It is so silly this month, and I've had just a blast creating it, and I really hope you have fun participating in it as well. And one more thing, if you haven't listened to the Art Talk about perfectionism just yet, I highly recommend you check it out because it is so tightly connected to what we've discussed today. And you can find that video right here. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you are not already to make sure you don't miss any art talks or any step-by-step tutorials. Then once that is done, click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.